Must be. What happened to you? You got carpal tunnel or something?
Skiers. Good morning, everybody. This is Environment Agriculture. We are going to get underway with our work session this morning. But before we do, I would like Representative Coulon, please, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Let me look at my schedule. All right. Got it.
Yeah, so it's gonna go in the same order.
Okay, so first order for SB 161, which is relative to exemptions from rabies vaccinations for dogs, cats, and ferrets. So I'd like to open up, I'm sorry,
61
SB 162. Oh, James. I would like to open up the floor for any discussion on that bill. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so, this is the bill where, currently, in order to, so there's there's the ability for someone whose animal is, medically unable to have a rabies vaccine to get an exemption to the vaccine, and they need to agree to a number of conditions. And currently, the exemption requires the signature of the animal's vet, second vet, and the state vet, and each renewal of that exemption requires all of those signatures, which is a bit of a heavy paperwork lift. So what this bill does is it says the first time around you need all the signatures, and then in subsequent years, if you need to renew the exemption, then you just need your own vet's signature. And I think this makes a lot of sense, so I think we should pass it.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Representative Creighton.
Yes, Madam Chair, I agree with the comment. What struck me was Commissioner Jasper's testimony, that they, from a department level, felt that it made sense also.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? For me, I also see that this streamlines the renewal of exemptions, and I think it's a good bill. And with that, I guess we can move on to discussing the next bill on our agenda here, which is SB 211. I open up the floor for any questions or comments regarding SB 211. That's relative to background investigations of solid waste and hazardous waste facility permit applicants. Yeah, Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this was a bill that came at the request of the department to make sure that we were keeping in line with other federal requirements to be able to do the background checks, if
Yeah.
my memory serves me correctly.
Yes. Yes, apparently there was some changes to how the FBI handles these background checks, and they wanted just to make sure, if I'm correct, that the statutes that we have are in line with that process from the federal government. Does anybody have a problem or question with that? Great. Okay. We'll move on next to SB 23, establishing a study committee on meat processing. I open up the floor for any questions or comments regarding that piece of legislation. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so this bill is looking particularly at the processing of what are called non-amendable species, which would be anything other than poultry, beef, goat, and sheep. So what mostly falls under this in our state is deer, elk, and bison. And it's more difficult for people to get these animals processed for a number of reasons. And this study committee would look at ways of addressing that, and also ways of addressing our general difficulty of getting animals slaughtered and processed in the state. And I think it makes sense to study it. So, and there had been some question about whether we should have 3 senators and 1 rep on the bill because it's a Senate bill, and rethinking that, I think the study will probably get done better if the reps do it.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you. First off, I concur with Representative Bixby in that last statement. However, I also think this is an extremely important bill, not only for non-amenable species, but in lieu of everything that is going on in the country and in the state with the processing, it might give us some more insight into what we can do to better serve the other animals that we have to deal with for slaughtering.
Thank you, Representative Comtois. Any other comments? Representative Morse?
Thank you. I was just curious if we decided we were going to change the date on line 31 from November 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024.
No, well, I think that there was some discussion on that. But I believe we're going to leave it at that. And I actually did have an amendment drafted to switch it to be 3 members of the Senate and 1 member of the House. But I also decided that we should probably keep it as is. And I wonder if there are any people from this committee who would be willing to volunteer to serve on that committee. Representative Comtois?
Be willing, but I don't want to, if there's someone else, I don't want to take up an extra space.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll put down Representative Bixby and Representative Comtois for now. I wonder if it might be a good idea to invite someone from Fish and Game to be on this committee.
Oh, yeah. That's probably a good idea. That would make sense.
Let me contact the chair of that committee and see if they have somebody who might be willing to serve. Because the thing is with these study committees, I know that the House Speaker is pretty overwhelmed with many of these committees that are coming out of these House bills. And he's very much appreciative if we can suggest some names to him for people to appoint to these committees. So, Representative Creighton.
And yes, Madam Chair, just to Representative Moore's comment on the date. So this thing gets signed by the governor sometime June, July. The committee forms August, September, and the due date is November. Is that enough time for them to do? I mean, it basically gives them 2 months to do the study by the time everything gets.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm just asking to make sure.
So my only thing is if you push it out to June, we're in the middle of legislative season, January through June of next year. So really to have study committees going on during that time is awkward and doesn't make sense. I mean, we usually schedule them mostly September, October to get it done. I mean, isn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay, all right. If you think that that's enough time to do it, then you're on the committee.
I want to be chair.
Okay. Representative Dutzy.
Yes, just for clarification, because I have some notes here. So the members of the committee shall be, and is it going to be the way it was originally drafted, 3 members of the House and 1 member of the Senate? That
Yes.
has not changed?
Right,
Okay,
correct.
right.
We would not be amending this bill.
Okay.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one quick question. Is this solely non-amenable animals or species, or small farms with? Okay, thank you.
What was the answer? Says non-amenable.
Non-amenable.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Are we clear on that? Everybody understand this bill and what? Yeah, Representative Comtois.
Thank you. And just to answer Representative Howard's other question, is hopefully with this study, we can come up with some other solutions.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much. And now we can move on to a discussion on SB 159, which is establishing another committee to study unlimited service area permits for landfills and out-of-state waste coming into New Hampshire. And again, I would invite anyone from this committee to volunteer to serve on this committee. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the committee felt that this was an important bill to take a look at to kind of get a better understanding of what what the true scope of unlimited service area permiture was with regard to landfills. And as you said, yes, another study committee, but I think when we're looking at solid waste in New Hampshire, we know that there are many different facets around it, and this is one that I think requires study.
Thank you. And I did speak with Representative Ebel, who is the chair of the Solid Waste Working Group, and asked her if they had any intention in the near future or even far future to study landfills, the unlimited service area permits, and as well as out-of-state waste and policies for out-of-state waste coming to the landfills. She said no. They that even though this is a priority and something that they'd like to look at, there are some other things on their plate right now that are taking precedence. So they don't think that she doesn't think that they're going to get to that within the next year. So, seeing as this is an important issue, it does, make sense for a study committee to be formed to perform this work. Representative Potenza.
So the process for the 3 members of the House that are chosen is by the Speaker. So if one of the people on this committee is interested, how's that process work?
So I have discussed this with the House Speaker, and he said if I had a list of names to provide to him, that he would consider them to be on the committee.
You volunteering?
Representative Murray, you had your hand raised.
Yes, so I think, I guess this is a question of the chair then. So if folks are interested, how do we express that to you or the speaker's office or?
Let me know. I'll write your name down now. Okay.
I'll
I'm
throw my,
interested. Yeah, I want to be on it.
Who?
2 year.
Potenza and Germana.
Madam Chair.
Hold on 1 minute.
Okay, so it looks like we have 4 people who want to be on it, and which is a little bit.
It's okay. We can have more names, and we can have
Yeah. Yeah.
the speaker choose whoever. I just
Right.
need to give him a list of names because, he's got to make the appointments, so he can figure it
Right.
out. Um,
Oh, and for anyone who doesn't end up being one of the 3 people who's selected, anyone is welcome to go to all of the study committee meetings and participate fully. So
But
it's
you're a non-voting member.
as a non-voting member, right? So so that's you and people who are participating as sort of audience members in the hearing generally get a fair amount of input. So so it's a pretty open process.
Anyone else have comments or questions about this bill? Yeah. So I don't see anybody, any amendments coming forward for this, but definitely with my discussions with Representative Ebel, this is not an issue that they're going to be tackling anytime soon. So I recommend that we pass this. Representative Dutzy.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just a question about process. If we are to attend those meetings, where is the meeting posted? Is it in the calendar?
Yes, they would be posted
Posted
in
in
the
the-
calendar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any of the study committees, after they're formed, and they have an initial date that they meet, they choose a chair and a vice chair and someone to clerk, and then they then decide the schedule of meetings, and that's posted in the calendar.
Jamie helps out with that.
Yeah.
She'll help get that on the calendar.
And
Representative
it
Bixby.
would be entirely possible for some member on this committee to just email the entire committee saying, as a courtesy, saying, we're having a meeting this week at such and such a time and place. So, so people can be kept informed about when the study committee's meetings are happening. So if you don't happen to pick up your calendar, you can pick up we can make sure it arrives in the email.
And we do have our committee researcher, Kristen Grant, involved in the process. She is support for the committee and does work and research for us. Representative Nab.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just ask procedurally, is the report language always the same for a study committee? And what is the process by which we would review a report as our committee or take up recommendations?
When the report comes out, if our committee is meeting and we have a work session, we can review the report and discuss it. Sure. And then if any ideas come out of that for proposed legislation, that's something else that we would be involved in. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so typically, a study committee report will have a couple of pages of findings phrased in a fairly succinct way, and then also have specific recommendations for legislation, although it wouldn't have the verbiage for, typically not the verbiage for the legislation, but ideas about what should go forward as legislation.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about SB 159? Nope, seeing none, thank you. We'll move on now to SB 267, requiring the Commissioner of Department of Environmental Services to consider cumulative impacts analysis in rules and statutes. Representative Bixby.
Okay, so I have an amendment on this. Just as a reminder, cumulative impacts are, so currently, rules tend to govern emissions and effluents by the single type of emission or effluent. So the rules for benzene would be a certain amount of benzene that could be emitted without, you'd have to keep your benzene emissions below a certain amount, but you might have a different amount for toluene, and it doesn't really take into account that toluene and benzene might be doing similar things biologically, and combined they might have a greater impact than they would individually. So that's one aspect of cumulative impacts. The other is that rules tend to deal with individual sources. So if you have one factory that is emitting maybe only a third of what the allowed level is, but you have 3 other factories next door to it that are also emitting about 1/3 of the allowed level, the amount in that immediate vicinity becomes over what would be allowed, because you have 4 different emitters that are emitting a smaller amount. And that's also another aspect of cumulative impacts. And when this bill came to the Senate, there was initially a bill that went to the Senate saying that they needed to take into account, that DES needed to take into account cumulative impacts. DES said, we don't have the expertise to do that yet. And the Senate's response was, well, we'll give you a position, and that person can study up on cumulative impacts, provide a report to, and that report based on that report, the commissioner can suggest legislation, and that report would come to us as would come to the Senate and the House, so this is all a very good idea. There are 3 minor points that I made an amendment for. One is that when it was drafted, it was going to send the report to ST&E and to Resources, but not to us. So I put us on the recipient list for the report. I also changed the reporting out date from November 1st to September 1st, because we typically have our bill filing period at the beginning of September. So we would want the report before we would potentially be writing bills about it. And the third change is in line 5. The as written, the bill said to determine what rules are, to determine, where it says what now, it said to determine if rules or legislation should be proposed. And I changed that to what rules or legislation, because we expect there's going to be some changes recommended out of this. And we want to make sure that all that information gets completely forwarded to the legislature, so we have a chance to review it and do any sort of legislation that we need to in order to address it. So I think these are pretty small changes, and I hope everyone will be okay with the amendment.
Okay, Representative Haskins.
Thank you. I support the amendment, and I particularly appreciate the fact that it's going to come back to this committee. And I hope that's something that we can consider in other bills we discuss.
Any other questions, comments? Representative Dutzy.
Do you feel that the changes in the amendment mandate that a study will be done, or is it still at the discretion of the commissioner to do the study?
I feel that as amended, this will require that the study be done, and that that the reports be provided to the appropriate legislative committees.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think by changing the word "if" to "what" is substantial, because "if" meant maybe, but determine what rules, it really specifies that they have to do it instead of "if."
Okay. Any other questions or comments about this amendment? I want to thank Representative Bixby for submitting this, and this is Amendment 1685H, is it not? Yes, we all have copies of that. Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Representative Comtois that I think that's a significant change, but it's one I support. It specifically says any potential legislation or rulemaking, and the fact that we do not currently have a process to determine what happens when, multiple effluents or emissions meet in a certain area, I think makes it pretty clear that something will come of this. So it isn't necessarily statute driven. It isn't necessarily legislation. But I think it's safe to say that since we're currently not doing it, that the report will result at least in some new rulemaking. So I think it is significant, but I think it is extremely important. Thank you.
Representative Bixby.
I just want to note that this amendment is also, I worked with Senator Altschiller on the amendment, and this is what we came up with our discussions with each other.
So I want to thank you, Representative Bixby, for putting this amendment together. It certainly improves the bill and puts some impactful language in it. So I want to thank you for your work on this. Okay, any other comments or questions regarding SB 267? Representative Dutzy.
I appreciate the fact that the changes are succinct, and I think it's brilliant.
Don't let it get to your head, though.
We can give the credit to Senator Altschiller, because she's the one who came up with that solution. So.
Okay. Moving on to SB 62, relative to landowner liability under RSA 147B, the Hazardous Waste Cleanup Fund. Any questions or comments regarding this piece of legislation that's before us? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so this was another department request, and There were some drafting errors in legislation about a decade ago, plus or minus. I'm not going to swear to the exact timing, but that needed to be fixed. And there were also a number of places where there were gender references that made things specifically male as opposed to being being universal about gender, and those were also changed in order to make it clear that we're talking about anyone of any gender is doing the things meet these requirements. So that's so I think this makes sense, and it's pretty much a nuts and bolts bill.
Well, and for me, it's not only a matter of gender, it just really clarifies, who they're talking about, rather than he or she. It's the owner or former owner, of whatever parcel of land that they're discussing here. So I think that just that in itself really clarifies the statute. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the other things that I think the department noted was the problematic phrase substance. I believe it was referenced somewhere else in statute. And so by amending that language, we are taking the ambiguity out of what is being referenced here. No, it's already there.
Yeah, no, there's no amendment. That's the bill itself. is
Yeah,
amending the language.
correct.
Yep. Any other questions or comments regarding SB 62? Seeing none, I know it's not on the list of things to discuss today, but just as a point of information, I wanted to let the committee know that HB 79, which was a bill that we passed, which is, again, another study committee which will, it was amended by our committee to review RSA 426 and RSA 434, and to make sure that those statutes are compatible, and that they are, kind of coordinating with each other. And that was made into a study committee. So that bill was passed by the Senate. And I believe signed by the governor too. So
Yes.
yeah,
So, so the upshot of that is that it says in the bill that we need to have the organizational meeting of the, for the committee within 45 days of the signature, which means we need to get, some volunteers.
yeah. So I know that you have stepped forward for that,
Yeah,
and
so
Representative
I'm
Comtois
happy to
did
do
as well.
that. And,
So
we need
would
one
you
more
like to?
volunteer.
I got it.
okay, and Representative Creighton said he would also like to do that. So okay, so we got that one covered. All right, good. So now we turn our attention to the, I want to say the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is SB 61, relative to surface water setbacks for landfills. Now, I know we've got a lot of comment to say on this particular bill. Before we get started talking about this bill, I'd like to just say that I want to make sure that our discussions are discussions that do not place any kind of motives or aspersions or cast aspersions on any people or organizations or businesses. This bill is about how we are going to move forward when we have to amend the rules that we're currently working under, or that DES works under, when citing landfills. So with that, I'd like to open up the discussion. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask if we could, because there is so much to discuss, could we maybe go paragraph by paragraph?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Could-
Representative Bixby.
Could I suggest, before we go into it, paragraph by paragraph, I'd just like to make a few points in terms of, just pointing out where some of the key areas of contention are.
Sure.
And then we can go into a more systematic discussion.
Be my guest.
So, I think probably the biggest sticking point is the idea of reversion, which is that if the rules are not finished within 24 months, then then permits can be issued under the existing rules, and that is something that some people find that really unacceptable, and some people find it absolutely necessary, and that's going to be a difficult nut to crack, and we can discuss that in more detail as it comes up. There's been a lot of requests from a number of different areas for a clear conflict of interest statement, and there is not actually a template for this at DES, but they do have within their rules standards of conduct for engineers and geologists. The impression I have gotten is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of resistance to having in the bill a clearer statement of what conflict of interest language should go into the RFP. So that might be a less difficult nut to crack. Another issue that's been raised is whether 150,000 is enough to attract a qualified consultant, and one approach to that would be that if that's not enough, then the department can approach the fiscal committee for more. It also may be possible to put language into the bill suggesting that, although it wouldn't be necessary in order to authorize it. Then there have also been suggestions about technical specifications, and that's something we can get to as we're going through line by line. And so that's my general, and this discussion points sheet that I passed around is really, I'm not trying to push any particular point of view. I'm just saying this is some of the stuff that's out there, and so that we can just get stuff on the table.
Okay, and thank you for outlining some of the things, at least that you see, that need amending. I just want to make clear that since there is some work that we feel that needs to be done on this bill, even though it is set as scheduled to be exec this afternoon, it will not be, because it's not ready for prime time, as they say. We don't have any definite amendment in hand that we can deal with. So, excuse me. So we will not be execing this bill this afternoon, and we will schedule it for another time. Representative Nab, you had your hand up.
I was just going to add to Peter's list, to Representative Bixby's list, the reporting out of the findings as a discussion point. I thought that was also a sticking point as to the committee receiving the report. But if I'm wrong, I apologize.
I don't know. Representative Potenza.
Yeah, I want to second that. The findings, as well as the dates, I think are a sticking point as well that we need to talk about. The 24 months, and if it's not there in 24 months, due to if there's something that happens. So, and permitting, I think, is extremely important as well, that there are no permits that are done until these the findings are in place and we have new rules adopted.
Okay. Representative Murray? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to add that portion to the sort of topics of things to discuss. I agree that I think we could probably add the report out to include our committee. I don't see that that is a terribly onerous task to CC a
Yeah.
committee on a report. That said, I would like to see if we can go sort of to make sure we're not missing any finer points. And that is, I mean, we'll definitely get there to Representative Patenda and Representative Nab's points. I think that those are well
Okay.
taken.
Thank you, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question that I think will be answered in the course of going paragraph by paragraph, but I'm wondering why we have a 2-year limit at all. We've been informed that I think we have at least 24 years before we need a new landfill, before the need arises. So why are we setting a timeline for something that's not urgent?
Well, that's something that we can discuss, but certainly that's a point that the Senate felt very strongly about, and they reached their consensus for that particular time period. So, I mean, it's their bill, so that's what we're looking at. Okay, so do we want to proceed paragraph by paragraph to look at this and discuss it? Representative, excuse me, Comtois.
Thank you. As we go through this, I think if we talk about the sections so that we do, each section at a time and that we state what section we're going through, just so everyone's on the same page, I think is extremely important.
Right. So
1 to 16.
we'll begin with the first paragraph, which is the statement of purpose, lines 1 through 16. Any questions, comments about that particular paragraph? Representative Bixby.
I think that I'm pretty comfortable with a statement of purpose. I think that I like I like the fact that it recognizes the need for redundant protection. I like the fact that it emphasizes the idea of site-specific requirements, because sites are fairly variable, and there need to be requirements that that deal with that. So I don't see any problems with the statement of purpose.
Representative Creighton.
Yes, Madam Chair. What I noticed on that, and it's just before the mention of site-specific requirements, is it's the whole concept of the bill in general is to re-examine how we do this. And so identifying distances, the rate at which water travels, the soil conditions, all of those are inherent in the description of the statement of the purpose. And so as you get into the bill, what we've told them is to figure out what these specifics are, not to define those specifics in something. We don't tell someone to do something, then tell them what it is that you just. So what we're doing is tell them to go do it. So go do your work and then come back and tell us what those specifics are. And a lot of the discussion and emails I've gotten over the last couple of days have said, well, you need to be specific in the bill. I completely disagree with that. I think that we need to be directive in go do your work and come back and tell us scientifically what those specifics are. And I just wanted, it says it straight, right in the statement of purpose.
And given that I guess the DES rules expire next year, then, this makes perfect sense and perfect timing. This is a very timely bill to direct how those new citing rules can be developed. Representative Nab?
I just had a question about line 15 and 16, if they are timely adopted, and what the meaning of that language is, and if it's problematic at all in terms of adoption of new rules and permitting of future landfills.
I don't believe they are, but
problematic. Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, the act also sets a time frame for the department's adoption of new setback rules and requires that any newly sited landfill permitted after the effective date comply with the new rules if they are timely adopted as provided in this act. So, Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am looking at one thing, and it says here, based on what Representative Creighton just said, it says, the act also sets a time frame for the department's adoption of new setback rules and requires that any newly sited landfill permitted after the effective date comply. The thing is we're saying that the setback rules now are no good because we're telling them that they have to come up with new setback rules. And so isn't that telling them they're already going to be doing instead of having them look at everything scientifically? Just asking the question.
No. Representative Potenza.
I agree with that. I think it should just say new sites. We're all talking about how everything is supposed to be site specific. So if we have to put anything in front of it, it should be site specific or not put anything in front of it at all and just say new rules. And I believe that that whole line should read, the act also sets a time frame for the department's adoption of new rules and requires that any newly sited landfill permitted, and then wipe out the rest, permitted, comply with the new rules as provided in this act. We don't need anything else in there that talks about time. The rest that's talked about time will be outlined in the rest of the bill.
Representative Bixby.
So one thing that's important to know about both the purpose and the statement of purpose and the findings is that they don't carry the same weight of requirement that the rest of the bill does. So they don't become part of statute law, and they are basically outlaying the general idea. I am concerned that if we do wordsmithing of every little bit, then that's going to raise red flags that might make it less likely that the other body would concur with this, and make it less likely that it gets signed into law. And I want to avoid anything that is going to raise red flags unless it's something that is really critical for how the bill is going to work.
Representative Creighton.
Thank you, ma'am. I would just like to pile on Representative Bixby. At the end of the day, I think people agree that this has got to pass. At the end of the day, whatever we do here, all of us want this to pass. And so I think looking at it from a practical perspective of what we believe will pass, and it's a matter of picking your fights. And I think that in this case, this verbiage, I agree with you completely, that it does allow the wiggle room if timely adopted, allows a wiggle room. I agree completely with that. But to Representative Bixby's perspective, and I agree with him completely, is that if we make 100,000 changes to this and we redo the whole thing, then we have abjectly failed, because the Senate will say, thank you, but no. And so I think we do have to be very careful in that those things that we believe need to be changed, and I think we agree on what needs to be changed, that we stick to that. And that we do a careful analysis, and Representative Bixby and the chairman have done coordination with the Senate, so they understand the specifics of what probably will and probably won't pass. And I overstated my point, but I agree with both of you. I do believe that this is one case where we just choose not to fight that fight right now and pick a better place to fight.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect, I don't think any of us wants to dissect it, change it, make, a dozen different changes. But I think there are 2 or 3 things that matter greatly. And I'm not yet aware that we've reached agreement on them. So I think that's where the discussion needs to happen.
Okay. Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to say, first of all, with regard to the point about the fact that this statement of purpose instructs the department to adopt new setback rules. I think it's clear that both the Senate and this committee and the House, having heard from a lot of experts, have concluded that new setback rules do in fact need to be developed. So I think it makes perfect sense in terms of the statement of the purpose. We're asking them to set the new rules based upon the scientific analysis that they're going to be doing. And then also, I just wanted to clarify, I believe that the clause, if they are timely adopted as provided by this act, essentially refers to the reversion to old rules in the case that DES does not finish the process, right? Because the "they" in that clause refers back to new setback rules. So I just wanted to clarify the meaning of that term refers specifically to an event where DES does not complete the assigned work within the 24-month period. Thank you.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to revert back to Representative Creighton's original statement about not wanting to be too prescriptive, I agree with that. I think that there are going to be moments when we do have to make some substantial changes, but along the way, being the technical things and all of that, being too prescriptive, I think, is going to negate the passing of this bill.
Okay. Okay. I guess we can then move on to the findings section,
17 to
line 17 to 24. Does anybody have any questions about that? Representative Bixby.
I am also good with the findings section. I think that it does in fact indicate that the 200-foot setbacks doesn't make sense, and that replacing it with a site-specific setback is important. It also emphasizes the importance of redundancy, and so I think that I don't find anything that is anything problematic in the findings section, and I think we should just leave it as is.
Okay. So do you want to skip to section 3, the new paragraph rulemaking? Yeah, and that's page 2, line 17 to 32. Any questions or comments about the rulemaking paragraph? Amending RSA 149M colon 7 by inserting paragraph 3, the following new paragraph: criteria for determining site-specific setback of landfill footprint from perennial surface water bodies to prevent, attenuate, or otherwise remediate the potential release of contaminants to each such surface water body from the landfill footprint, and so forth. Any questions or comments about that section? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so at one point I was thinking about it says the line 23, the department deems any other factor the department deems necessary to provide adequate protection of surface water, perennial surface water. I at one point was thinking that that's a kind of roundabout way of just saying protect, and thought that maybe we should change that. But going on the principle that I mentioned earlier, that we don't want to make any changes that aren't really necessary and would create red flags, I think that we should just leave that as is. It basically means the same thing, even if it spends another 4 words to say it.
Okay. Representative Haskins.
This is the section that gets into the science. And this is where I'd like to hear from one of the scientists who does this work and knows it better than I do. Would that be possible?
I don't know. I mean, this is a work session for the
Yeah.
committee.
I just, again, this section I think is important for us to understand the science, and if we can have that explained more explicitly, it would be helpful to me.
Yeah, Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, because right now we're under rulemaking, and I don't know if, I guess unless we had the Department of,
Well, perhaps
come
there's
up because when we get into like site-specific perennial surface water in those sections, I think that's where you get into the
Okay.
science stuff.
all right, I defer.
Any other questions or comments regarding this section? Okay. Then we're looking at section 4, which is page 2, lines 33 to 37, and page 3 up to line 25. And that section discusses site-specific new paragraph for site-specific setback to perennial surface water, which amends RSA 149-M:9 by inserting after paragraph 14 the following new paragraph. This regards to, in regards to formulating a site-specific setback to perennial surface water under rules adopted. Representative Dutsey.
Yeah. Can somebody explain to me what lines 23, 24, and 25, what that sentence means? Yeah, the department shall include as a condition to any permit the implementation of a measure proposed in the application for the permit upon which the department relied in formulating the site-specific setback required. I mean, what does that mean?
I'm reading it. Hold on. Representative Howard.
It sounds to me as if they're as part of the agreement to put in the landfill, there are conditions that are in the contract that are separate from that sound as if they might be separate from the rules.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But as I read this, in reference to the points 1 through 8 above, so when the department concludes, right, what the contract in permitting is in this case, if any of these measures are put in place, that measure is included in the contract that is drawn up for the permit, right? So if the recipient of the permit agrees to, point number 5, for example, increasing the thickness of the liner as a part of their site-specific work with DES, that would be then included in the contract that is drawn up with DES. That's how I read that,
Yeah.
that section.
Madam Chair,
Representative Creighton.
I would just frame it another way. In my mind, simpler is better. I probably wouldn't have worded it this way, but if you make a ruling, you got to tell the people why you made the ruling. That's the way I read that.
Representative Dutsey.
Yeah, then I would suggest that maybe we make that clarification. I mean, I know about wordsmithing, but I've just read that over and over again and I couldn't figure it out. So maybe we do need to clarify it.
Representative Bixby.
I agree that that is not the clearest of language, and I think that what I'd like to do with that is see if we can make sure that see if we can get clarifying language, and I'd like to work with one of the senators on that to make sure that whatever clarifying language we come up with really is truly matching their intent, because I don't want this to come off as being us just sort of doing grammatical correction on the Senate for the sake of, being the school marm. I want to make sure that we actually are getting it clarified in a way that they would agree with, and I will talk with members of the Senate committee about this and see if we can come up with a somewhat clearer clearer language so that it's not, it doesn't become something that's looked at as ambiguous in some lawsuit at some point.
I concur with that. Representative Haskins.
Yeah, I think we've heard testimony that there are a number of scientific flaws in the sections 3, 4, and 5, and that's why I was hoping we could get some help with that, since we have people in the room that can help us. And that would add to the discussion that Representative Bixby has with the Senate.
Okay. Representative Creighton.
The one thing that I think helps us out with that is on line 2 where it says without limitations. So this is a suggested topics to consider. You don't have to consider all of them, but if something's missed in here, then by all means add it. So this is not a comprehensive list.
Representative Potenza.
I agree with that. And I understand where you're coming from because this list could be exhaustive. It could go for pages and pages. I think I would have rathered there to be just some generalities in here instead of they got really specific, right? They probably shouldn't have. It should have been more general because that's the whole point of us contracting out. So I think at the top, the without limitation is protective for that. Even if some of these things here might not be accurate.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and it would be a huge list. I'm happy to see some really good examples, though, showcased here. So this is a good list to start from. Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to concur and say that I see this as being comparable to or parallel to a section in HB 56, which the bill which a lot of us really liked. For example, the project improvement allowances, right? One or more specific allowances, I'm referring to 56 now, may be added to the calculated time based on specific additional control technology, monitoring programs, et cetera. And so I see this list, which is, as Representative Creighton and Representative Potenza pointed out, it is without limitation. So this is I see it as being comparable to or parallel to that section of HB 56.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this section? Okay, we can move along to section 5, which is page 3, line 26, going to page 4 up to line 18, having to do with Department of Environmental Services Solid Waste Landfill Setback Requirements Assessment and Recommendations. Do we have any comments or questions on this particular section? This is having to do with Department of Environmental Services contracting with one or more qualified consulting firms or individuals to perform an assessment of the current perennial surface water protection and setback requirements that are applicable to the permitting of newly sited solid waste landfills in order to meet the requirements of sections 3 and 4, the ones we just reviewed. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so this is a section where we might want to add more specific language about conflicts of interests, because this is the conflict of interest language should be something that is included within the RFP or the request for proposals. So I passed around a sheet that has it says Bixby 5.9 at the top, and this is basically the last 2 pages of the bill with a couple of amendments that I'm suggesting, and it's the one that says that has the word surface water at the very top. If you go down to Roman 1, then I would, there's some language I'm suggesting putting in. The draft request shall require each proposal to provide a statement of any potential conflicts of interest with any entity that may benefit from any change in setback requirements, indicating that preference will be given to bidders without such conflict of interest or to bidders with the fewest conflicts of interest. The draft the draft request will also indicate that preference will be given to proposals which demonstrate that the qualified consulting firms or individuals have credentials and experience in evaluating the health and safety risks associated with environmental protection, as well as the engineering and hydrological aspects of landfill design and siting. So that's, I think that will still give the department a lot of latitude in terms of the selection they make, but will provide some sort of indication of what the legislature thinks is, appropriate for the selection process.
Representative Haskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if the phrase bidders with the fewest conflicts of interest doesn't undercut the statement.
I think that
Representative Bixby?
yeah, I think that depending on how one measures conflicts of interest, it may in fact be impossible to get someone who has absolutely no interest whatsoever because there are a finite number of firms in the Northeast that would be probably likely to bid on this, and it is likely that some of them have done work at some point or other in their history as a business with some of the entities involved here, and we may not be able to find someone who has absolutely no shred of potential conflict of interest. So that's why I put in the phrase fewest as opposed to absolutely none.
Madam Chair.
Representative Creighton?
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, it's a pretty small community, a pool of folks. The question for Representative Bixby, did you run this by the Senate? I agree with the verbiage. We had talked last week about potentially extracting an existing
Right.
document.
Right. So it turns out there is not a template within the Department of Environmental Services for the conflict of interest. They do have standard code of ethics for engineers and geologists that does reference conflicts of interest. I have not run this by the Senate yet. I haven't run it by other stakeholders, and that is something that would need to happen before you finalize this. I wanted the committee to have to have a look at it and before I brought it to other people to see if there's any other changes that the committee felt needed to happen before we brought it.
I actually think this language says what it needs to say about conflict of interest, and also brings into view the fact that we do have a limited number of people who would bid on something like this, and you don't want to eliminate all of them. So this makes sense to me. It's well worded. Representative Potenza.
I think it's well worded in the sense of about a conflict of interest, but we're not defining what a conflict of interest is. So that's leaving that up to the interpretation of the department that's going to pick it. So I know that what I wrote is quite strict probably and needs some work. But if you can't define it in saying what the conflict of interest is, so for example, you have someone that's bidding on it that wants a permit, that has been trying to permit a landfill in New Hampshire, and they're bidding on this, that's obviously a conflict. They want to get the next contract, real contract, where the big money is. So I think that we have to specifically put some stuff in there that defines what the conflict of interest could potentially be, and have them spell that out so we know that history. I mean, to me, there's no other way.
Representative Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had done a little bit of researching, and while I understand that there might not be anything that's 100% germane to this within DES, I did find something referenced in administrative rules around third-party accreditation, and that's with regard to laboratories, and there was a conflict of interest statement there. So I was curious to know, it reads something to the effect of that it acknowledged that all current or former relationships, associations, or investments that may influence or appear to influence judgment, discretion, or impartiality for laboratories applying to or accredited to the program have been disclosed. And then it continues on. So there is something out there, whether or not that's suitable to be changed or included. It looks like this is in an ENV-C 310.04, and that's applications for initial or renewal approval of TPAOS. So third parties.
Representative Bixby?
Yes, also for the sake of, in the DES, code of conduct for engineers, the language reads as follows. The professional engineer shall avoid conflicts of interest as follows. 1, promptly inform his employer or client of any business association's interests or circumstances which could influence his or her judgment or the quality of his or her services. 2, not accept compensation, financial or otherwise, from more than one party for services pertaining to the same project unless the circumstances are fully disclosed to and agreed to by all interested parties. 3, not solicit or accept financial or other valuable considerations from material or equipment suppliers for specifying their products. 4, not solicit or accept gratuities directly or indirectly from contractors, their agents, or other parties dealing with his or her client or employer in connection with the work for which he or she is responsible. 5, when in public service as a member, advisor, or employee of a governmental body or department, not participate in considerations or actions with respect to services provided by his or her organization in private engineering practices. And 6, not solicit or accept an engineering contract from a governmental body on which the principal or officer from his or her organization serves as a member. So that's what's currently in the administrative rules regarding professional standards. It's basically the equivalent language for geologists as engineers.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're talking about conflict of interest, I'm just curious if when we do that, and I know we're just talking basically about the Department of Environmental Services, but does this take into account the executive branch that actually approves the contracts?
Representative Bixby?
That I'm not quite. So you mean does that code of conduct also apply to everyone in DES or everyone in the executive branch?
Correct.
That is something that I don't technically know. We might be able to get someone from the department to explain what they have for their internal code of conflicts of interest.
Representative Dotsie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems to me like this is out of the scope of our wheelhouse and maybe should be tossed over to research or OLS. I find it hard to believe that there are no states in this nation that have not had this same problem. And if we did research on that, we might be able to come up with the appropriate wording that have been used in other legislatures.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like that suggestion by Representative Dutsey. I also picked up on the word disclosure, and I think that should be inserted somewhere.
Well, we do have our committee researcher in the room. So I guess that's a question that we could throw your way and take a look at for us. Okay. Representative Bixby.
So not only might other states have this, but we might have it in some other context within our state. So there's probably some language out within our current laws somewhere that deals with addressing conflicts of interest on RFPs and wherever that may be.
As well as a definition of what conflict of interest means. Representative Potenza.
I agree. I think disclosure is really important. So if we have a statement of a conflict of interest and we're asking these people that are interested in putting in a proposal or having this contract, as long as they're stating whatever is, maybe it's a known or perceived conflict of interest, that also, it just lays it out on the table as well. So the less of those, the better, of course. So I know we've talked about that there's not necessarily a lot of entities to do this kind of work, and we might have slim pickings. So I know we need to be sensitive of that, but in specifically listing what those could possibly be, like I had written out, and telling those people that they need to disclose that if they are going to bid, then I don't think we need a lot of research for that. And if we want to use some of the specific statute language that's already in place that has been used before, I think that's great.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding Section 6? I'm sorry, Representative Nab.
I just had a question about the bidding process. What happens if only one?
I'm sorry, I meant Section 5.
Sorry.
Yeah,
If
go ahead,
only-
I'm sorry.
If only one contractor submits a response to the request for proposal.
Excuse
or-
me, say that again?
I just had a question about the process around the request for proposal. If only one contractor submits a bid, or if there's 0 contractors that submits the bid, is that anything that's within our scope, or is that really a response from DES?
No, not that would be, yeah, the executive would take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Potenza.
Before we're done with 5, I think that this, besides having the conflict of interest in there, couldn't we, in this area where we're telling them, under A, B, C, and D, shouldn't we put the experience in there as well? What experience that we feel the provider that's chosen should have?
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would defer to DES for experience because none of us here are experts in that area. And I think they know what they're looking for in a contractor more so than we could ever.
And we wouldn't want to spell that out in statute, I don't think. Representative Germana.
Thank you. I think if in the language that Representative Bixby has provided, we are giving them the word qualified, and I think that, and I'm looking for the specific language here, but it has to do, demonstrate qualified consultant confirms experience in evaluating health and safety risks associated with environmental protection, as well as the engineering and hydrogeological aspects. That's precisely why we want them to do this, is because we are concerned with the health and safety risks associated with environmental protection. So I don't think it's inappropriate at all for us to specify what we mean by qualified I like the language that Representative Bixby has offered to do that. Thank you.
Representative Potenza.
That's exactly, I have some bullet points that go from that too. I think you actually have to define the term what qualified means. So at least, direct and relevant professional experience in geologic and hydrogeologic conditions similar to those that are found in New Hampshire, direct and relevant experience in environmental and health risk management. At least those two bullets, I think are extremely important.
Any other questions or comments regarding that statement? Let's have some time to look at that. So, Representative Potenza, just to be clear, in your page that you spelled out in experience under that paragraph, you are just talking about those first two bullet points?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I wrote should be outlined in the bill reflecting something similar as listed below.
Yeah.
I know we can't put anything. I do like direct and relevant professional experience in groundwater flow and contaminant transport modeling in soil, saturated and unsaturated conditions, and in bedrock, including highly fractured rock. That's just because I've been researching what these people do. And I in no way am an expert on all of this, but the research on it is pretty clear what a company needs to have. And I think it's really important that not one company is going to have all of this. So we can talk about dates and costs. We're going to get into that. But it's not just one contractor. Most contractors, just in the nature of this, and I have experience in this, are not going to have all of the tools in the toolbox. They're going to subcontract pieces of this out with relationships that they currently have, which will still apply with the conflict of interest and all of that. So it's really important that it's not, whoever is hired for this or whoever's putting a proposal in is not going to necessarily have all of those people right on staff. A lot of these people are going to be subcontractors.
Okay, my concern would be that list of, if we make this so definitive like this, will we be limiting the pool of applicants based on, as well as the number of contractors they may subcontract out to? Because let's face it, there's probably many of these contractors and subcontractors who may end up having some kind of conflict of interest at some point. And I just hesitate to be so specific that it would negate many of the people who might be very good at what they do and prevent them from participating in doing this study. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, I concur with what Representative Aaron is saying. I think that if we make it too specific, there are two risks. One is that it's going to make the burden of making sure that every bit of language is followed by DES is absolutely spot on. It's going to make the process much more difficult. But one of the things that we have to recognize is that DES has been working in this area for decades, and we might not agree with everything the department has ever done. But we do have to recognize that they do have a certain level of expertise, and we need to trust that level of expertise because they are the ones who are going to be performing this work. And if we provide general guidelines like I've laid out in my in the proposed language here, which by the way, I'm not, I don't have any ego in this. If people want to change it, that's fine. But I want to make sure that we retain it as being sufficiently general that DES can use their expertise to make sure that they're fitting the language.
Representative Dutsey?
Yeah, regarding the process, if we have research this whole issue and maybe come back with a couple of statements, at that point, we will be doing another work session, or we will be able to look at the amendment and decide whether or not we meets our criteria. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Well, I mean, I thought we had made the decision to throw this over to research, and now what I'm hearing is that we're trying to come up with a definition of conflict of interest. So if we do throw this over to research what's been done in New Hampshire and across the nation, when that information comes back, won't we have time then to determine if that meets our criteria for conflict of interest? So why are we wordsmithing it now? Is
So
my
no, I
question.
think what we were just kind of exploring, what is meant in terms of a qualified firm. And those were the bullet points that Representative Potenza had brought up. Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Representative Dutsey, and I also weighing in again that the disclosure statement could handle some concern that we have about if there are conflicts, tell us what they are.
Yeah.
So is it
Representative Bixby?
can we move on to the next section?
Representative Germana had his hand up, so let me just
Okay.
entertain what he has to say.
Entertain, man, it's the right word, I suppose. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, you're always entertaining.
Yeah. I just wanted to concur with Madam Chair as well, as I think, and I also want to say I very much appreciate Representative Potenza and the work that you did in this and thinking through it. So thank you very much. I just wanted to, as I said, concur with the chair and say that I don't think we want to be too prescriptive. I think that we want to be aware of what belongs in statute. And I think that the language that Representative Bixby has proposed, or something akin to it, provides enough room for DES to work within without getting prescriptive in ways that we don't want to see put into statute. So I hope that was entertaining enough. Thank you.
Well worth hearing. Thank you. Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having been through many, many RFP processes, I would trust the DES people who are managing this process to go through the criteria of who they're of the people that they're looking at, and also their knowledge beforehand of many of these people, so that I think they'll go into the process with a pretty good knowledge of their abilities and their conflicts.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. We will look forward to hearing from our committee researcher. I'm sure she's looking up something now too. We'll look at section 6, which goes from page 4, line 19, to page 5, line 7. So this has to do with target of completion for rulemaking, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussion on this part. Representative Potenza, go right ahead.
So most of this section has to be changed because a lot of this section then coincides with the next page, at item 3. So, and I think that there has to be wording in here of the 24 months. I don't know how the wordsmithing of that would look like, that giving their leeway that if the study's not completed in time or the rulemaking's not done in time, that any, of course, permits are held until those rules are in place. So there's definitely some real work that has to be done here. And I also 150 days. I've had numerous conversations with entities throughout the state that are educated in this. There is no way a full statewide study that's going to be done, that's going to impact us from years to come, that we're going to be going off of, couldn't be completed in 150 days. It's just not possible. And I think it should be changed to 250 or 300 days. I also think the cost should be increased so I can let other people, even at 250 days, which is 8 months, is still quite early for what we're looking at. If they're going to be all over the state, because basically you're looking at every place in New Hampshire that you could cite a landfill. That's what they're going to have to be looking at, all site specific. So, I mean, from one location to the next, that is so much work that's done on the geologic and the hydrogeologic conditions. And for this to not be rushed, there doesn't need to be a rush, as the representative said earlier here next to me. So, I'd like to have a discussion about that.
Okay. I'm not sure that your interpretation of the kind of study that this bill is proposing is in sync with, well, what your idea of a study and what this bill's idea of a study, I think, are two different things. I don't think this bill is suggesting that any potential landfill site in the state has got to be studied. And I don't think that that's going to happen. Representative Creighton?
Yes, ma'am. And the way I read this bill is that what we're directing them to do is to define the standards that would be used by a contractor that would go and evaluate the site. So this bill does not, in my mind, evaluate a single site. This bill describes how those sites would be evaluated if they are received.
Mm-hmm.
Can I follow up?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
Representative
I
Petanza.
agree what you're saying, but to do that, you actually have to study a site. You have to study the site to be able to build. You can't just go off of it. That's why I know what you're saying, but to develop the rules, you actually have to know the information. It's correct. And it's so different all over New Hampshire, is from location to location is completely different.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my understanding, and I would ask someone to correct me if I am incorrect, that DES is going to start looking at all the criteria right now for landfills. And what this outside subcontractor is going to do is come up with what they think it should be. DES is going to come up with a set of rules, and they're going to take into account what the subcontractor says to put into rules. They are not going to be telling us, the subcontractor cannot dictate to DES what has to be done. They can only propose. There'll be public hearings, but at the end of the day, the rulemaking is going to be with DES. And the fact that we're going to have an outside subcontractor who's going to have other subcontractors, as you stated, looking at this, and DES has now 2 years to start the process, right, to do this. I think we're overlooking this. This is not looking at every landfill. DES has all that data about the landfills in their purview. They know what's going on at these facilities due to inspections and other things. So I don't think that we need to broaden the scope so much, and I think we need to leave it as is.
Representative Bixby?
So I think it might make sense just to refer back to the previous page where where it says what is going to be proposed, which is in section 1 of that. It's in section 5, starting at where's the line here? Section 5. Let me just. This the next page. No, that's section 5. Section 5(1)(a). So, and, yeah, so that's.
That's
starting
page
at the top-
4.
Starting at the top of page 4.
Yeah.
And the scope of proposals shall include the following: an assessment of the environmental, safety, and technical aspects of perennial surface water setback requirements and related protections in current state law and administrative rules that are applicable to the permitting of newly sited solid waste landfills. Recommendations for using criteria enumerated in section 3 of this act to establish site-specific setbacks. Recommendations for any other factors the consultant determines necessary to provide adequate protection of perennial surface water in section 3 of this act. For each such recommendation, the consultant shall identify each state that has adopted the recommended factor and describe how such state has applied the recommended factor, including a summary of the outcome of each permit application to which the state has applied the recommended factor, and
Recommendations on a methodology.
recommendations on a methodology for consideration of the measures set forth in this section of section 4 of this act, and any other additional consideration recommended measures to provide greater or more redundant protection of surface perennial water body in forming a site-specific setback that differs from what the department would otherwise require under its rules. So that is basically looking at the principles that are used in other states now and seeing how those principles can be applied to improve our rules in order to make it more site specific. So it's really about determining the principles rather than in doing an investigation on the ground.
Representative Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually curious that with regard to, so this does not get lost, our desire to see there being the House Environment and Agriculture Committee being given a copy of said report, would that be appropriate for that to be here in section on page 4, lines 15 through 18, or would that be appropriate to be somewhere else when we're talking about the submittal of the final report?
Well, it says the department shall make the report available on its website. So, I mean, we as a committee can certainly have that and review it. So I think we'll have it available to us.
Sure, I guess I was just may I?
Yeah.
So I think we were at one point we had discussed about the desire to have it like just physically sent to the House committee, and maybe I'm misunderstanding that request.
Representative Bixby.
Yeah, I think that if it is published on the department's website, and we receive notice that it's been published there, that's sufficient. We don't need to have a bunch of paper sent over to us.
Yeah.
Or even more specific electrons sent to us. I think we can look at the website, and I appreciate that it's going to be on the website because it means the process is really public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
May I follow up briefly?
Representative Murray.
So, okay, so just, I mean, not to nitpick, but there isn't really a request to notify us that it's been published at all. It just says that it shall be published on the website.
I think
That would be sufficient.
I think that's sufficient. I don't think it needs to be in the law.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the issue of reporting, one of the questions that I've had is, so I think like a lot of people on the committee, I'm not happy with the provision for a reversion to the old rules, but I also understand that if we alter that substantially, the likelihood is going to kill the bill. DES has assured us that they can and will report within that 24-month time period, but then we have a provision in the bill that tells us what happens if they don't. And where this leads me is to believe that we need to stay on top of this process even before we get to the end point. We're talking about now where they will finally, deliver a report. I realize we might not want to put into statute that they would come back to us at a regular basis or at a 1-year point, say halfway through to report. But I'm just wondering what we can do as a committee to make sure that we are getting some timely reports. For example, I would like to, halfway through this process, have someone from DES come and talk to us and tell us where they're at, to give us a progress report, to assure us that they're on track, that they can deliver this within 24 months. Whether that needs to be inserted, I don't know. I just wanted to make it clear that I think that that level of communication, when we're talking about the possibility that we could revert to the old rules after 24 months, I think this committee needs to have some reporting maybe halfway through to let us know that DES is in fact on track to deliver that report within that time frame. Thank you.
Representative Germana. Now, in this section here, it says the selected, page 4, line 15, the selected contractor shall complete the assessment and submit a final report to the department within 150 days after contract approval. So they have a specific time limit to get this report done. And when the report is done, the department is going to make it available on its website. I think it's, a simple request to have DES supply us with the report. I don't think we have to codify it. And that being said, I would personally, as chairman of this committee, I will keep on top of this process and make sure that the director comes to our committee to tell us what the status is of this process.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so I was essentially following up on what the chairman said. We have the capacity to without laying it out in a statute, we have the capacity to request any of the department personnel who we work with as a committee to come and give us reports, and providing them with enough notice so that they can organize their thoughts. But that is within the purview of the committee to request updates from a department on ongoing business. So we don't need to put that into statute. If we wanted to set up a subcommittee that would be, dealing with oversight, that is something we have the capacity to do as a committee. If say half a dozen of us, or plus or minus a bit, wanted to be a subcommittee to essentially continue to track this, that is something we can set up. We have the capacity to set up as a committee without anybody's permission or without writing any new laws.
I would be amenable to that. I think if we had a rulemaking oversight committee, a subcommittee, that might be a good answer to this, and we wouldn't have to put it in statute. Yeah.
So, I'd like to say, I think that DES, barring extraordinary circumstances, is entirely capable of doing this work within 2 years. What I'm concerned about is extraordinary circumstances. And we had another department that we work with not too long ago, had one of their key staff members leave on very short notice to take care of her ailing parents. That put things behind in the Department of Agriculture for several months. So we know that things like this can happen, And we know that this is the sort of thing that is out of the department's direct control. So I would like to I think that it would make sense to have some sort of extension process available for, in case there are some more extraordinary circumstances. And it should be, it was, Senator Waters suggested that the appropriate person to provide that extension would be the Commissioner of DES, and that would be that the Commissioner could provide an extension to the Solid Waste Division if there are extraordinary circumstances that are causing delays. And some of the things that I could see as potentially causing a delay are the loss of key personnel for health or other reasons, failure to get a qualified consultant on the first RFP round, or disruption of customary operation of the department or the government from something like a pandemic. I think that there should be something in place that would allow for an extension, and the length of that extension is something that would be, we'd need to discuss a little bit more.
Representative Murray, I'm sorry, my brain just went
Okay,
blank.
I didn't know it was me.
No.
Anyone over there? So so my question is, I guess to Representative Bixby, may I?
Sure, go
Okay.
right ahead.
Do you see this as a one-time extension? Is that what you're envisioning?
I could see the commissioner being able to provide, one extension or two extensions. I don't think that the total length of extension should be any more than a year. And I think the senator said he'd be comfortable with 2 months. I'm not convinced that I think 2 months might be a little bit short. I think we need to find out from various stakeholders who might have objections to this about what range they would be willing to accept.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about if we put in like 3 extensions of 120 days each? That way you have 3 extensions, but you're also pushing them under the gun.
Yeah.
And you're limiting the length of each extension so that they have to come back with a good reason for that.
Representative Howard.
One quick question. Thank you, Madam Chair. So these extensions would push back the reversion time, correct?
Yes. Representative Morse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I think that this is a good compromise, and coming up with exactly how many extensions and for what amount of time, I think, 3 at 120 days is a good idea, but, we can do a little more research on that. But I do think that this is something that if we want to see this bill pass, we need to compromise a little bit, and it may not be perfect, but we need to consider it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, I don't think they'll ever need the reversion clause. I mean, they want to get the work done, and I think they will get the work done in time. But I also am sensitive and appreciative of the points that Representative Bixby has brought up, that, stuff happens and we do have delays for unforeseen circumstances. We want to build in something here that would prevent that reversion if those delays occurred. Representative Coulon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious if there's a way we could put a provision in to let DES use artificial intelligence so they won't be interrupted by a pandemic or any other extraordinary circumstance.
That's an interesting concept. I think I don't know if would they use ChatGPT. It's such a new technology. I don't know that they'd want to rely on that. But thank you. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I was thinking of, I personally am of the mindset, the department did say that they felt like 24 months was something that they could achieve.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, given Representative Bixby's exigent circumstances. I would like to see there being perhaps maybe something 3 extensions possible around the 90-day term. I mean, I really don't, when we're pushing something out to 120 days, then we're getting into past a quarter.
Yeah.
So I would, I guess, caution going that much further in each extension.
Representative Dutzy.
Yeah. I will try to be, well, I have to think about my wording very carefully. I will not be able to support this bill unless there is a foolproof amendment that forces extensions if they are necessary and takes it out of the hands of the commissioner to make the decision.
Okay. So my question to you would be, Representative Dutzy, if the commissioner didn't make that decision, who would?
It would be automatic. In other words, if they couldn't meet the 24-month deadline, that they would be forced then to have whatever, a 90-day extension, a 120-day extension, but that extension would be mandatory so that the reversion didn't take effect. That's what my concern is.
Would you require the commissioner to give a reason why they would need the extension? Why the work wasn't done in time?
No, I mean, I think that probably would be evident, because of delays or something. So I don't think we have to be that granular. What my concern is, this is my third term. I have definitely seen changes or have perceived changes that I'm uncomfortable with in the Department of Environmental Services. So I think if we don't want something to inadvertently revert back to a former permitting process, that we have to be very deliberate in making sure that there's no wiggle room and that the report isn't produced in 24 months and there's leeway in our wording so that reversion can take place. That's what my concern is.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And along the lines of what Representative Dutzy has suggested, I can imagine a clause that would say something to the effect of in the event the DES is unable to complete the report within 24 months, the director shall request an extension up to, let's say, 120 days and provide rationale for that. And so that directs the director to apply for that. So in that sense, it's automatic. And with that extension, there is a rationale provided by the director. So to me, that seems like it might be able to accomplish a couple of purposes.
Okay, so, and I also want to be clear, the report is not the one that's done in 24 months. The report is done after 150 days. And it's after the 150 days that rules then can be developed and go to GELCAR and everybody else that needs to give its blessing. So and that's where we're going to get into where we might need an extension of time because, I don't know when they're going to get this done. Representative Comtois.
Thank you. Just for clarification, because I thought we were talking about an extension for the subcontractor if they didn't complete their report on time, not the department. I am expecting that the department is going to be working on rules and will have their rules completed in 2 years. I mean, I don't know. They have 2 years to complete it. They're going to be waiting. They're going to start their rules now, and then they're going to take a look at what the contractor does, and then take that and integrate and see where they compare, where they're the same, where they're different, and have discussions about that. But I thought the extension was for the subcontractor and not DES itself.
Well, the way this is written, the contractor or subcontractor has to have their report shall have their report done in 150 days.
Right. So-
Representative Bixby.
Right, so, I expect that the contractor will be held to that 150 day limit that is in the bill. And DES will, work with them to make sure that happens. I also am, I have full confidence that DES can, with all things being equal, produce the rules on the timescale that is of 2 years. But if, God forbid, something happens to a person or persons who are key to the process in DES, and they need to hire new people to take that on, that it will take time for that to, for that adjustment to be made. And that's the sort of thing where there might need to be an extension.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Representative Marie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same playing field for is the extension would also include any abeyance. Is that correct?
That's my intent.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Potenza.
So, in a sense, who's really going to be police? So let's say they hire the contractor and it's not done in 150 days. There's not really anyone that's going to be policing that. So if it takes longer than 150, or if there's more money that they need, I assume that they're going to come back and ask for that. Correct?
I don't know.
I know, but
Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so the money is one issue that DES feels that they can get someone for 150,000, and one of the if it turns out that on the first round of the RFP that 150,000 is not sufficient to get a qualified contractor, then they would be then DES has it in their capacity to go to the fiscal committee and request enough money to get a qualified contractor. So that is something that we do not necessarily need to write into statute.
no, I know.
It is, it is something that we could put in if it would make people more comfortable, but it's not something that they wouldn't need the authorization in the statute in order to do that.
Representative Potenza.
Okay, so first question kind of answered. So yes, the 24 months, and then having extensions. I get it. So are you saying that we're going to have all of that, have extensions in there, and still have the paragraph that states it can revert back? Is that what we're saying?
Representative Bixby.
Yes, so we still have the reversion paragraph will still be in there, and if there is an extension, then the reversion won't happen until after any extensions have expired. And I have been told by senators, by other folks who are aware of the lay of the land, that if we remove the reversion clause completely, then we have no bill. And I am not willing to be in a position of having no bill, because having a bill that we don't really entirely like is a whole lot better than having no bill.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to say I appreciate your earlier clarification so we could know what we were all talking about, the difference between the report, which is 150 days, as opposed to the rules, which is 24 months. So I appreciate your clarification. I think there were two ways of thinking about the possibility of an extension to the 24-month period. One proposed by Representative Dutsey, which is not specific to say to a pandemic. It's an audit, and it would be automatic if DES is unable to complete their work within 24 months, whereas the possibility that Representative Bixby has offered would be under extraordinary circumstances. I want to say I come down in that case with Representative Dutsey, in that if DES is unable to complete the work within 24 months, if we say the director shall request an extension up to, let's say, 90 days, right? In that case, it gives the director discretion to determine. It could be 30 days. He could say, look, we're almost there. We just need a month. Or he could say, we need 60 days, right? So it's not saying that it has to be 60 or 90 days. It would say, for example, up to 90 days and provide a rationale. And that, I think, would provide for the kinds of circumstances that Representative Bixby is referring to, right? If there are those kinds of extraordinary extenuating circumstances. But again, that would be in the rationale of the director. And again, that request is flexible because it would be up to. And I think that would also meet some of the concerns of the stakeholders, because if the director were to come to the committee and say, we need another 45 days in order just to complete this report, that provides the assurance that certain stakeholders are looking for. That was the argument that was made to us. Obviously, businesses who are looking to get permits need to have some certainty in the market and in the process. And so again, if the director were to come and say, we need X number of days in order to complete this study, I think that makes sure that we're not simply reverting to the old rules, and it provides the stability and the assurance that stakeholders are looking for.
Representative Potenza.
So there's two things that are in this, and I don't know if it really can be changed. So on page 4, under line 1718, it says the department shall make the report available on its website and shall review and consider the report's recommendations when drafting rules. As we've already discussed, rules are already being worked on now. So in all actuality, all this work, the department could actually not use any of the information based upon this line. There is nowhere inside this entire bill that says that they have to use the information that is provided from this report. And the second thing is, I understand what everybody's talking about, right? We were told in a committee about this paragraph. When you say in anything, in any bill, you say, okay, you got to have it done by 24 months, extensions, whatever, it doesn't matter. Hey, you have to have it done by 24 months, unless you don't have it done by 24 months. It negates this entire bill. It can't be in there. I'm sorry. There can't be a revert back at all, because we always have to trust and verify. And so having it in there still has an out, meaning I don't care if there's 3 extensions. It still has an out. And that is a problem.
Representative Dutsey.
Okay, if I think we have a couple of goals here. One of the goals is that we want to get rid of the 200-foot setback. And the other goal is we want to make the process more scientific. So what if we said that, basically, there would be no timeline on the extensions, but that there would be no reversion back until the report was finished? Okay, or something to that effect. So basically what you do is that we could keep the wording in, revert back. But if it couldn't revert back until the report was finished, then no matter what the time frame was, there would never be a reversion back. So you keep the wording that the other body wants, but in reality, it can't revert back until the report is completed, whatever that time frame is.
Representative
The
Representative
rules,
Bixby.
right, exactly, the rules, not the report.
Thank you. Representative Bixby?
I think that that would guarantee a veto. And I don't want a bill that's going to be guaranteed to be vetoed because I think that there is no chance of overriding one.
Representative Creighton?
What a good time. So if I was king for a day, I'd just cut that whole reversion thing out. Okay. Unfortunately, I was only a colonel and not a king. And I understand the environment where, we've been told that would, force the Senate into disagreeing with the bill. Got it. So then the alternative then is say, okay, well, we're going to extend the thing out as long as we can to keep the reversion away, and that's where the extensions come in. And essentially that gives you, if you did 3 for 120 days, for example, that gives you another year. So that pushes the reversion out for another year. 3 extensions, 360 days. And so that means you basically got 3 years. But to me, an automatic extension doesn't make any sense. That just, you may as well just put 36 months and call it a day. If it's automatic, you got to have some way to hold the department to task to get the thing done in 2 years. So I don't like this, the way it's structured, but I like it better than getting the bill vetoed and trying to overcome a veto. So that's sort of where I'm at. And I would sign up to it in this general form because of that. Sorry.
Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start by saying that I agree with Representative Creighton that and Bixby that if we allow extensions, I think that we can probably avoid reversion. But my question is, don't the old rules expire during this process?
They expire next year. So they have to get new rules in place anyway. Representative Dutsey?
If there wasn't a plan to invoke the reversion, why are people fighting so hard to keep it in the bill?
Representative Bixby?
So, I don't know if everyone noticed this, but there is a profound lack of trust in this region. And those who, so there are some people the people who want the reversion in there are afraid that there will be an intentional attempt with litigation to slow the process down forever, and if there is no reversion, if it's completely open-ended, then the new rules could take forever and ever because litigation was slowing them down. On the other hand, those who don't like the reversion clause think that the process could be slowed down with litigation in order to trigger the reversion clause. And there is no good answer to that complete lack of trust. And we had to sort of shoot somewhere in the middle. And my feeling is that the closest we can get as a shot through the middle and still get the bill passed is to put in the extension and I hope that the Senate and the governor will be willing to accept the bill with the extensions in it.
I'm sorry, Representative Comtois. I'm just silencing my phone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up with what Representative Bixby was saying, I wasn't able to be here last time for this hearing, so I went out and spoke to the director specifically to ask him about the rules and if it was reasonable that they would be completed in 2 years And his answer was yes. And having worked with the director for the last 6 years, I believe him to be a man of his word. And he's always been upfront and honest when dealing with this committee. And so, based on what he told me, that is how I am looking at this bill. So,
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want a follow-up question. I think it was Representative Howard, I think. But in any event, the question was about when the current rules expire, and the chair, you answered that they expire next year. And I think that's a further reason why it's important to get something passed, right? Is because the moratorium or the abeyance, right, during the rules writing process, I think is critically important, particularly since the current rules are going to expire. And we want during that time to have an abeyance, right, so that the department can continue to work on the rules. So in any event, I just wanted to add that in as a reason why I also agree that it is especially important that we get something passed. This is this proverbial sausage making process, but particularly because the rules expire next year, I think we really do have to do something that it has the best chance of getting through and providing that abeyance.
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to make a comment about Representative Potenza's earlier two-part question, which is that this bill doesn't require the report to be enacted. I feel equally concerned that the report that comes out could say, hey, everything's great as it is. We're leaving a 200-foot setback. So I don't think there should be a requirement that it's enacted, because I think there's a little concern about what might come out of this report, and it might just leave things as they are, which is not, I think, what anyone on this committee wants. So, thank you.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of concerns. I think reversion is untenable. I appreciate the political implications of how we get the most protective bill, because some of these judgments are going to be value judgments, not scientific judgments alone. And because of that, I want the maximum amount of protective language in the bill, however we decide that is. And I also think on principle, it's not pro forma that the legislative body writing the law gets the report. I understand it's going to be on the website. I think it's a statement that says to the people writing it, this report is going to be received by the people who wrote the bill. And so those are just my concerns today.
Okay. Representative Bixby.
I'd just like to follow up on Representative Germana's point about the rules expiring with next summer, and the rules will have to be written, but if they have to be written by next summer rather than by the timeline in this bill, and without the input from the consultant's study, I think we can be pretty sure that the rules are not going to be as good as if we pass this bill. And if we don't pass this bill, then we'll be stuck with, until the new rules are published, things can go forward under the old rules, and we will probably get less good rules without this bill. So I think that even though this bill is, there's the phrase about the perfect being the enemy of the good, which I think might be overstating. The really good is the almost acceptable is still I mean, I don't think any of us are going to like the bill that we pass, but I think that we would even less like the bill that we don't pass.
Representative Germana.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And to speak to Representative Bixby's point, which was speaking to my point, I would also remind, and also something that the chair remind us of, that with that 150-day time period, right, for the report to come back, right? So you're talking about 5 months or so. And then that report is going to go on the website, and the chair can ask the director to come talk to us when that report has been delivered, and then we can ask questions. And I think that speaks to Representative Bixby's point about how we can use this 24-month time period. I'm in the favor of automatic extensions if needed, but how we can best use the time period, because I'm also not happy with a lot of aspects of this bill, but I think that we collectively can speak to some of our concerns through working with DES during this process after the report comes back, and help to shape the process in ways that hopefully will make us all more comfortable with the outcome. Thank you.
Agree. Okay, so we are coming up to 11:45. We could probably talk about this bill all day long, but we do have some time constraints, and I just want to take the last few minutes to kind of wrap things up. I know Representative Bixby is working on an amendment, and I'm sure we'll take a lot of the comments and thoughts and compile them as he's writing up the amendment that he will be sending to OLS. Is that true?
Well, we can discuss who's going to send it, and
Yeah.
I want to.
I want to do this together.
Yes, I want it to be a cooperative
Yeah.
process. I would like to have both the chair and the ranking member's name on the amendment. Whoever's name is first, I don't care, but I want it to be, a non-partisan thing.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up our work session for this morning. And I would like to have us split out into our caucuses so we could further discuss the upcoming exec session this afternoon. Thank you.
My suggestion.
And we'll be breaking for lunch. I guess you could take now till 1 o'clock. We'll see you till 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Democrats, let's go up to 403. I didn't reserve it, but I think it should. do is, we can circulate a draft.
Yep.
And to the end, you can use your caucus, meeting my caucus.
with them on the landowner liability.
That's from the,
They didn't bring this up.
Environment, Agriculture, and this afternoon we are going to exec a number of bills. So let me get myself organized here. And we have a substitute for Representative Brulard, and it's Representative Karen Reed. Welcome. And Representative Sophikitis is absent today. Otherwise, we're all here.
I didn't catch the last name.
Reed,
Reed,
yes.
like R-E-E-D?
R-E-I-D.
R-E-I-D, thank you.
You're welcome. I think that's what you were asking, right?
Welcome to our committee. So we will start with SB 162, and I am looking for a motion. Representative Dutsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a motion for OTP on SB 162 relative to exemptions from rabies vaccinations for dogs, cats, and ferrets.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Thank you, Representative Creighton. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. We've said before, this is basically making the law a lot easier for owners whose animals have a severe reaction to the rabies vaccination.
Is there any discussion on this bill? Seeing none, I'd like the clerk to call the roll.
SB 162 OTP. Representative Creighton.
Aye.
Representative Comtois, yes. Representative Verville.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny. Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
No.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutsey.
Yes.
Representative Murray. Representative Jamana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse.
Yes.
Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
18-1, motion passes.
And would is that okay to put on consent?
Is it okay to put on consent?
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. We move on to Senate Bill 211. Do I hear a motion? Representative Creighton.
I move on to pass, please.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Representative Morse seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion, Representative Creighton?
Yes, ma'am. SB 211, relative background investigations for solid waste and hazardous waste facility permit applicants. Essentially what that does is it streamlines the process and it makes it in compliance with federal regulations as well.
Do I hear any discussion on this bill? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, one of the key things is that without this, the DES won't be able to do the interstate background checks, so they need to have the language aligned with the federal law.
Thank you for that clarification. Do I see any other discussion on this bill? Seeing none, I call the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's SB 211 FN OTP. Representative Creighton.
Yay.
Representative Comtois, yes. Representative Verville.
Yep.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny. Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
Yes.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutsey.
Yes.
Representative Murray. Representative Jamana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse.
Yes.
Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
19-0.
And I'd
Motion
like
passes.
to see that on consent.
It has a fiscal note.
Oh, it has a, that has a,
Okay.
oh, yeah, yeah. 10,000. I'm sorry? Yeah, I can go on consent. Okay. And I also want to remind, excuse me, I want to remind those who move the motion that they are responsible for writing the committee report. And I'd like to get those, this afternoon, or by this evening. You can send it to me electronically. That would be fine. Moving on to SB 23, establishing a study committee on meat processing. Do I hear a motion, Representative Comtois?
Yes, I'd like to move OTP on SB 23.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Voigt. Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right now, we have amenable and non-amenable species that are required to be slaughtered at USDA facilities. The non-amenable species are having a difficult time, and we really need to look into alternatives for them. And in doing so, that might help us look at some other avenues also. So I think it's extremely important for the people that farm non-amenable species to have this studied.
Thank you. Any discussion further on this bill? Seeing none, I request the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. SB 23 OTP, Representative Creighton.
Yay.
Representative Comtois, yes. Representative Verville.
Yay.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny. Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
Yes.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutzy.
Yes.
Representative Murray. Yes. Representative Germana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard. Yes. Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse.
Yes.
Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
19-0.
And I request that to be on consent. Is that okay? All right. Very good. Now we move to SB 159. Do I hear a motion? Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion of OTP for SB 159 and establishing a committee to study unlimited service area permits for landfills and out-of-state waste coming into New Hampshire.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Representative Potenza, thank you. Representative Murray, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
I would, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Good.
Yes, thank you. So I think that the committee believes that this is something that should move forward, given the fact that folks in the solid waste working group had indicated that it's an important subject that needs to be looked into, and though they are not taking that up under their purview, it is something that we definitely have the authority to do and should.
Very good. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. OTP motion on SB 159-FN. Representative Creighton.
Yay.
Representative Comtois, yes. Representative Verville.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny. Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
Yes.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutzy.
Yes.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Germana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse.
Yes.
Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
19-0. I don't know what the fiscal note is. Okay.
Okay, that could go on consent as well.
What's the fiscal note on it?
Let's see, 159. Yeah, there's no fiscal. No. Yeah. Okay, moving along to SB 267. Do I hear a motion? Representative Bixby.
Yes, I'd like to move amendment 2023-1685H to SB 267FN. And
Do I hear a second on that? Representative Davis. Representative Bixby, would you like to speak to your motion,
yes,
please?
so SB 267 has DES hire a person to look at the issue of cumulative impacts of contaminants. So essentially the impact of either multiple contaminants from multiple emitters in a particular area, or multiple different types of contaminants that might together cause a greater degree of health risk or environmental risk. So DES is this person in DES will look at this, and issue a report to the legislature after on the date listed. And what the amendment does is it changes the date of the original date of November 1st, 2025 to September 1st, 2025. And it makes sure that the report goes to our committee as well as Senate Energy and Natural Resources, ST&E, and Resources, Recreation, and Development. It also strengthens the requirement on the department so that by changing the word "if" to the word "what" in line 5, and that really indicates that they need to provide this report, to do this report and provide it to our committee and the other legislative committees. And I hope you'll all support this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Bixby. I certainly will support this amendment. I think it really makes the bill a better bill.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding this amendment? Okay. Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on this amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. SB 267, adopt amendment 2023-1685H. Representative Creighton.
Yay.
Representative Comtois. Yes. Representative Verville.
Yay.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny. Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
Yep.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutsey.
Yep.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Jamana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse. Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
19-0, the amendment is adopted.
Okay, wonderful. Then I need a motion.
I'd like to move ought to pass with amendment 1685H on SB 267 FN.
Do I hear a second? Representative Davis. Seconds. Would you like to speak to that motion?
I think that I pretty much covered it in the discussion of the amendment. So
Okay.
and we also talked about it this morning. So if anyone has questions, I will answer them. But otherwise, we can just move on to a vote.
Okay. I then ask the clerk to call the roll on 267 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Voting on SB 267-FN with amendment 2023-1685H. Representative Creighton.
Yay.
Representative Comtois. Yes. Representative Verville.
Yay.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny. Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
Yes.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutsey.
Yes.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Jamana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse. Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
19-0. Will this go on consent?
I don't believe you can put it on consent.
fiscal note is around 100,000.
So it can't go on
100
consent.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we will then proceed to SB 62. Do I hear a motion, Representative Kenny? I need your microphone on, please.
Yes, a motion to OTP SB 62.
Do I hear a second?
I second the motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Nab. Representative Kenny, would you like to speak to your motion on SB 62?
Yes, on SB 62, it basically changes the adds hazardous substances to the hazardous waste for cleanup. So it's just, adding that, those words. And it also adds owner rather than he or defendant.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding Representative Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think, to your point, I fully agree that it makes that change for the away from hazardous substance to make it more clear.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I then ask the clerk to call the roll on SB 62.
Thank you, Madam Chair. SB 62 with an OTP motion. Representative Creighton.
Yay.
Representative Comtois, yes. Representative Verville.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Coulon. Representative Kenny.
Yes.
Representative Potenza.
Yes.
Representative Smart.
Yes.
Representative Bixby.
Yes.
Representative Dutsey.
Yes.
Representative Murray. Representative Jamana.
Yes.
Representative Haskins.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Nab.
Yes.
Representative Morse. Representative Voigt.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
19-0.
19-0, and I would like to see that be on consent. Any questions about that? All right, then. So, we have one bill left, which is SB 61, which I had mentioned this morning would not be exec this afternoon. Instead, we are going to schedule the exec session for SB 61 on the 23rd. I don't know if I need to give a time certain, but I would say 11 a.m. That way in the morning, before that, I'm planning on having a presentation from one of the departments.
Okay, so that's in process?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we would have a presentation in the morning and then we can exec that bill. I know that you are, Representative Bixby will be developing an amendment to SB 61, which between now and the 23rd, we will all be able to take a look at.
So my plan is to work out the amendment in the coming week and touch base with whoever I need to in order to get more feedback on some of the details. And I will share that with Representative Aaron, and then Representative Aaron and I will be emailing it to our respective caucuses so that we don't have an issue with an open meeting law, and then give feedback only to either me or Representative Aaron, whoever is your caucus leader, so that we don't run into any open meeting issues, but we can still get feedback and make sure that we are addressing as many concerns as possible.
Okay. And I would have the committee researcher, when you get your information put together for the conflict of interest issue that we discussed, that you can forward your report to me and I'll share it with everybody here. Okay? All right?
Maybe send it to both of us.
Or send it to both of us and then we'll disseminate it. So with that, I guess we are done with our work for today. Unless, no?
If you have a blurb, you got to get it in.
Oh,
before
yeah, I
day's
said
done.
that. I told that to
I'm
everybody.
reinforcing.
Okay. Get your blurb into me. So our work for this afternoon is done, and I want to thank you all for a very wonderful and robust discussion this morning of all of the bills, especially the landfill bill. I think, again, this committee shines in working together and discussing the issues that are before us. And I truly, truly appreciate how well everybody works together. And it's a credit to every single one of you here. So thank you.
And I'd just like to second what Judy said on that.
I'll third that. No, let's take a vote.
Can you pass this down? This goes to Rep. Creighton, and this goes to Rep. Bethany.
Let's see.
Yeah, Madam Chair, do we have, are those available electronically?
The forms,
Yeah,
I believe, yes, it is. I
So I can,
I had emailed them to, I had emailed them out to everybody. But, and I can email it out to you again if you would like. I had sent out an electronic version of it, but if you want to just write a Word document that has it formatted that way, that would be perfect.
okay, yeah, I get it into you by 5 this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week.